Welcome back, mi gente, to the Found in Translation Talk Show. Special post-debate edition. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're listening to this as a radio program, thank you for listening to WPPMLP 106.5 in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, the city that loves you back, the city that currently doesn't have any wide receivers. As a podcast, you're listening to this all over the country, all over the world on your podcast distribution platform of pleasure. But of course, for my ride or dies, the people that just don't want to hear it, they want to feel it, they want to see us have this conversation. They can't wait till tomorrow morning. They're watching this on Facebook Live, Periscope, and on many other video platforms. This is your Rafael Collazo. And as you can tell, it's not just the Puerto Rican coffee, my friends. I am fired up. We have had, you can't have 11, 12. How many more hours of testimony do we have today? And then, of course, the second half of the doubleheader, maybe not have quite reached the same level of excitement. Of course, on this episode of Found in Translation, we're going to talk about these impeachment hearings. Muy caliente, cosa bien caliente. In Washington, later on, yo tengo bochinche, some of my homies do too. But first, we got to talk about this presidential debate that just ended moments ago. I don't even know if it's still over, but we had to get rolling. It's late on the East Coast. Let's bring into this conversation my producer, compadre, and co-host on these post-debate specials, and the host and founder of the Que Lo Que podcast, Mangu for your soul, no question about it, Elbert Garcia. Elby in the building.
Ray, it's good to be here. Good to be. I know it's late night on the East Coast, but I want to say what's up to my West Coast folks. I also want to give a special shout out to on this Trans Remembrance Day. Just remembering we still got a couple of hours, but a lot of things to kind of think about on this day as well.
Absolutely. And we have to also give a shout out to Latina Pay Equity Day, which was today. And for those wondering, well, you get these guys. Hey, I invited every woman I know, and it's a little late for them. So they'll be on future episodes, but we still celebrate not only the women in the movement who are our leaders, but also Latina Pay Equity Day, which we'll reference during the show. And of course, got a website for the Southwest flavor. And bring some class and sophistication to the conversation. We need to bring that back in our politics. The founder and host of Vanguardia America, James Garcia. Welcome back, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Thanks for staying up late for me, so that we can talk tonight about everything that's happening around the country.
I'll tell you what, LB. If you're gonna get any stocking stuffers for me this Christmas, please give me any audiobook that James narrates. I just want to hear his voice for hours and hours. Thank you so much for joining us again. You can continue the conversation with us. Thank you so much for Facebook Live. LB, let people know before we get into so much to discuss today and tonight, how they can get engaged in this conversation on chat and also on video.
On video, folks, just follow the stream, the link that I'm putting in on the screen right now. I'll also put it down in the comment section as well. Just click on the StreamYard link and you'll pop in and we can have you up on screen there. Or if not, just add your comments down here. We'll flash them on the screen. Questions or answers. If it's late, maybe the baby's sleeping, maybe your honey's sleeping, but you still want to participate. Type in those questions in the comment section there on our Facebook, or tweet them out, and we'll make sure to put them on the screen.
And well, let's just get right into it. Thank you all. We encourage people. We encourage the interaction, as people saw from the last video show we did on my birthday. Thank you so much. People were so generous with their time. Of course, our compadres, many other great friends who not only participated on the video chat, send their well wishes, and my friends that helped us enjoy my birthday coast to coast, and you all know who you are. Y'all were very helpful. Again, thank you so much for joining us. This is Rafael Collazo, where we bring the talk. This is Found in Translation, the show that stacks truth on politics and today's hottest issues from a diverse perspective. And let's get right into it. I was thinking, LB, as we sum up, and James, as we sum up today's activities, and particularly we're going to get into the impeachment stuff, which is really on some levels really the headline here in a moment. But in terms of thinking about this debate and kind of the totality of the day, I was thinking about, especially when we were younger guys, we had a little more free time, how excited we would get for a great college football doubleheader. Remember those days, LB, in college? We didn't have a care in the world. We're too broke to go enjoy ourselves doing anything else. We sit around a dorm room, sit around a little TV screen and watch, okay, it's going to be SEC and then Pac-10 at night. And then we get an Alabama-Auburn barn burner, double overtime, a kick return. History's in the making. The college football tournament's all screwed up.
Yep.
And then we flip over. Oh, great, Pac-10. Oh, it's gonna be awesome. And then you're settling in, and you realize, oh, I didn't realize Arizona State's 3-5. There's been a couple early turnovers. It was that
Again
safety. I don't really know anyone on these teams. Maybe we can sneak. Maybe our fake IDs, LB, can get us into the
club and do something else.
And honestly, the second half of the day or the third, the nightcap here, this Democratic presidential debate. Quite honestly, to me, there were so many big picture things with the other debates, where there was attacking the front runners and the ideological fights, but this one didn't match the rhetoric, I believe, of the moment in history that the impeachment hearings set up for us going into the evening, and didn't even match the rhythm of where we're at. I almost felt like we went backwards in terms of pace and tone and energy level of the candidates. James, how are you feeling? Are you feeling let down about the nighttime activities like I am?
Well, I mean, I think bottom line is the country, and certainly on the Democratic side, people are ready for it to shake out. They're ready to figure out, who are the top 3-5 people. Let's just move on. We've had so many people on stage for so long now, and to have this debate, frankly, first of all, on a night after 9 hours or 11 hours of impeachment hearings, that's a lot of that's the same audience, right? That's an overlap audience, and people just don't have that much time on their hands. I watch it because in a way it's my part of my job, right? To watch those debates and to watch follow the impeachment hearings. And yeah, there's something that was still there for me in the debate, but there also wasn't a lot of movement. There wasn't anything I discovered new. I know who these candidates are. I basically know where they stand on the issues, and now I need to see them in action, if you will. And there's nothing really necessarily sort of triggering. I mean, they opened the debate, of course, with a conversation about the impeachment hearings and what was heard today. And there was some studied stuff heard today, and that whole thing is moving forward. And I mean, clearly, there's going to be an impeachment vote in the House, and Trump is going to lose that vote. We still don't quite know what's going to happen in the Senate, and on and on. But and so it started off interesting and kind of strong in that regard. But then they kind of moved into, where they are and where they have been in candidates. And for folks like us who've been following it closely, we're not necessarily learning anything new about them. And we certainly didn't hear anything new from Buttigieg, given his rise in Iowa and New Hampshire. It wasn't necessarily a spark there. Right? Yeah,
no, we're definitely going to talk about him. LB, I want to bring in this conversation because, kind of the theme of many of the last debates has been sort of like picking on the front runner, right? So Biden got banged on a few times.
Yep.
The tables turn quickly to war. Now it's interesting now that Buttigieg, at least in Iowa, not nationally certainly, but in Iowa, is the front dog. I think many of us anticipated that he would start getting attacked.
And he really did, right?
I mean, a lot of indirectas, a lot of subtle stuff.
Yeah.
Klobuchar Booker about experience. Booker, I'm glad he pointed out, he's not the only Rhodes Scholar here that's been a mayor, and I've also been a senator, and he was also magna cum laude Rhodes Scholar, Mr. Booker, Senator Booker, but it didn't get into that. It actually, if there was any theme, I think it was electability argument, but certainly, sort of a muddled fracas today.
One thing I appreciate, Elbert, if we go on, is I appreciated a lot of talk about women's issues in this one. That a lot of that's been left out of the conversation. So I appreciated that sort of new kind of a development in the process.
Yeah, and I think they also got into talking a little bit about they talked about climate change. I think they try to focus a little bit on the issues in terms of there. But yeah, I think in many ways, and maybe they were trying to vibe up of the days or the weeks of the news. And so I think they were really, it seemed to me that they were more united on trying to attack the president or trying to differentiate themselves, from the president. But, it just seemed like that was a strategy that kind of just fell a little flat, partly because, well, that's the expectation, right? Like we expect all these Democrats to be against the president and the president's policies, right? And so I think we've heard that, and I really do think, Ray, that on the day of these impeachment hearings, I think the country or voters wanted to know, where are you taking this? Who is the leader that's going to be taking this? How do we want to lead this country? And how are you not going to just tell me about the issues, but tell me like a solution? Look, everyone knows that the solutions have to be practical, right? Like, I mean, these Democrats getting in, trying to like the left versus centrist. I mean, like anyone who's an elected official knows that like it doesn't take 2 days to pass a law, right? Like we know this, right? We know these things. Don't tell us what we know. Tell us, give us a little more energy, both in your style, but also just in terms of your policy. And I didn't get that today.
No, but and I think if anything, the more I think about it, I think we're probably being kind about it, frankly, because when I think about great stand-up comedians, and I remember when Eddie Murphy would go on Arsenio Hall? I'm showing my age a little bit young. I know I look younger than that. But one of the things that was so incredible about Eddie Murphy, and I'm glad he's actually going to do art and go on SNL and make things now again, but is that there would be moments. I don't know if y'all remember when Michael Jackson appeared on Arsenio Hall like as a surprise. And I remember Michael came and left, and Eddie Murphy captured the moment. He didn't get into a shtick thing. He was like, and it's just moments when the great leaders read the room, read the audience, and I think Obama at times was good at this, and others. We have to read the moment. Nobody captured the moment for me. Nobody turned it on tonight.
Yeah.
Give me a second.
Yeah.
No, you wanted what you needed. The country is rudderless right now. Even people that are even maybe kind of 50-50 about Trump, they realize this is a mess on some level, and I think people that certainly were watched tonight wanted someone that captured the moment and someone that assured them that they could not only kind of lead us in the future, but could capture the moment right now and synthesize how we're feeling and assure us that they could move forward. And then we quickly, I mean, Biden tried to get into that like very clunky political wide terms of, well, this shows why someone like me is the most electable. And I thought he came off very pompous. I think overall he did pretty well afterwards, frankly. But and I think that's what was missing. They came off like politicians with a script when they didn't have the
I agree with that. Yeah,
the gravitas to move forward and really tell it what we needed to hear tonight.
Yeah, Rafael, I agree 100%. I mean, the way I would put it is that we know who these candidates are. We know where they stand. We've heard their stump speeches, and now we want to know which one of them is going to lead. Right? We want who's going to separate themselves from the pack, and it doesn't necessarily have to be one person right now. But it has to whittle down, and I think people are tired of these debates where you've got 10 people and the time is so divvied up that it's really hard to get a grasp of their leadership skills. And so I think what people are looking for now is that in the next debate, please don't bring 10 people, right? Give us the top 5, give us the top 3 or 4, and let them have at it, and let's see how it shakes out in terms of who can really stand on their feet, go toe to toe, and bring us solutions. And to your point, bring us solutions at a time when we know we don't have someone leading in the White House, and that this person is probably headed for impeachment, and if with any luck, indictment after he's kicked out of office. Who's going to lead? Who's going to fill that void and take us to a new level? Okay,
and I'll say this, James, that watching tonight, if I would, I think you're many people are going to walk away disappointed, saying, I don't think any of these people are for this, or I didn't see enough from them. So do we want to whittle it down, or are we looking for an alternative, or we haven't heard enough from people that are, that are X factors, and we'll talk about Julian Castro later, and if we have time, get into the Bloomberg and some of these other potential jumping in, because I think people are seeing that we have had several months to kick these tires. And maybe there's things about a lot of these folks that we admire and we like. And, I think the progressive wing of the party has 2 good choices they're happy with. But I think the rest of us are like, well, ideally it would be a more progressive Biden from 30 years ago on his best day.
But let me say this one thing.
Not what we have right now.
Let me say one thing. I am at least comforted by the thought that almost every one of those people on the stage is competent and capable of filling the shoes that they need to fill in the White House. One or two exceptions.
Interesting, but again, I go back to it. Listen to the word you just said, and you're a man of words. You're a scribe. What did you just say?
Competent and capable. Yeah.
Competent, capable.
Yeah. But I'm actually comforted by that, right? We're not in a place where we have 10 people on stage and you're going, is there any one of these people?
Well, we're not Republicans.
Could they be presidents, right? Could they be presidents?
Well, but that's not the question, James. The question is, who's ready to lead us right now? Is to try to guide us, and I'm talking about from the now, like talking about that someone you can go to help us make sense of what's going on in Washington.
Yeah,
and lead us, and then comfort us with the fact that you can beat Trump or Pence or whomever. But I think people want to make sense of all this.
Yeah.
So what does this really mean? And I think there was opportunities, and there were moments where a few people could have taken advantage and try to give us some of that. Now, part of that's time too. It's so limited, but
if I think at least
nobody grabbed the moment is my point. Nobody was even trying to do that.
If at least 9 out of the 10, I'm not impressed with Tulsi Gabbard, so I'll just say it. But if 9 of the 10 people on stage I think are competent and could be president today, and certainly much better president than we have now, at least 4 or 5 of them I think are fully capable and can lead and have what it takes to move us in a new direction and move us forward. So I think that I'm glad that we have choices, right? I'm glad that it's not about, there's nobody really there to compete with this crazy Republican agenda that we've been dumped into in these recent years.
Now, part of me thinks that, let's start from the top. Mayor Buttigieg was the man on the spotlight on some level by the punditry class, right? Now, part of me thinks like on some level, nobody really has enough time to really stick out. You could argue it's maybe Biden and Warren. But Mayor Pete didn't. I don't think Mayor Pete moved the ball forward for himself tonight. Is my point.
Yeah,
but not forward.
Well, and I was surprised. I will say this: I was surprised that. Well, I was surprised and I wasn't. I was surprised in some ways that some other candidate didn't go up and say, "Hey, let me challenge you." Right? Usually that's what happens. Right? We've said it before. The top vote. The top vote.
But they didn't have to because he didn't shine like that.
Well, but the other thing is this too. I think another thing plays the fact. People know that Buttigieg is a favorite of at least the donor class. And I think that I want to say that I think that part of it is that people didn't want to show division today, and they certainly didn't want to show division in front of the donor class. And that I mean, like, that's how I took it, right? Because my thing is like, look, man, like, and again, we're and we're in Atlanta. You would think that with his poor record with the Black community, that would be something that would that someone could have pushed that button there, and yet they didn't. Right now, people could say that could have backfired, but still, like, I'm a little surprised by that.
But do you feel outside of that attack piece? Do you agree with me that he was fine? He did his talking points, but again, didn't really rise to establish more of a front runner A-list.
Yeah, no, I
final
agree.
2 or 3 status.
I
thought it was the talking points.
And I would say what I'm saying. And I would say, just like James said, I think look, we know that they're competent. Right. And excuse me. Like, I would hope that by November we would know that these folks are competent. Right. Like, that's the case. Right. But this competency thing, again, is a little bit artificial, too. Right. Because at the end of the day, and I know we're going to talk about this, their resumes were good going in. Right. For the most part, most of those folks have resumes going in that they can make the case.
Well,
right. So the question
other than Mayor Pete, frankly.
But the question is, and he said it, and I agree with them. It's like, are you electing on someone on what you did, or what they want to do, or what they can do,
or their talent, or
their ability to incite debates?
I mean, look, it was 11 years ago when the future president was considered to have a very light resume, and he was a U.S. senator. And
remember, he barely think about this, right? Like, he won that Senate race, but he won that Senate race because of the whole blow up with his Republican candidate.
And he won the primary because it was 5-6 candidates.
Right.
The candidate messed up.
But I think the big thing with Buttigieg is that this was a national audience. This wasn't the Iowa audience, right? And I think the other candidates are basically saying, why are we going to treat him like the front runner around the country if he's not, right? He may be doing well in Iowa, and people aren't following it as close as we are necessarily, right? So they don't get that sense. And again, I think I'm impressed with Buttigieg on a lot of levels. But I just ultimately, I just can't help but feel like, some of this is sort of the same old in the sense that, oh, it's another white guy. Yes, it's a gay white man in America, and that's new, and that's groundbreaking. But it's also another white guy.
Yeah, well,
and are we just gonna keep going there and going there and going there? It's just,
Democrats love the law professors. I mean, this is I look, obviously the diversity with being LGBT is a factor with this whole situation, and being extraordinarily young, and he's got this unique background with the military thing, but part of it is this is Clinton, Obama, smart, smooth, got all the right answers. The donor class, to your point, LB, the donor class loves them. The intellectual class loves them. A lot of the corporate Democrats he's their plan B if Biden implodes, because they don't want Warren and Bernie messing with their tax money. So, I mean, but that being said, he was there, but how they moved the ball forward. Warren James, I'll give her points today because, and we'll talk about the person that was missing from the stage, who usually was the one that kind of brought this to the table. But Warren was the first person and made several points, I thought strong points related to how some of these policies disproportionately impact people of color. And unlike any of the other ones, which had more rhetorical responses to that, she actually had some specific policy points she brought up in that regard. Steady Warren, I thought her answer, the tax and healthcare stuff was okay. She's got to get smoother with those responses, but because I think they're real concerns for some people.
Yeah. But I think she just has to be a little more pithy. That's
but nothing earth shattering. So what do you think about Warren's performance?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, first of all, I really like Warren, right? I mean, I think she is definitely one of those people who could walk into the office day one and be a good president, right?
Absolutely.
So there's no question about that. As far as what she did tonight, again, nothing sort of terribly new, but I don't know that it was possible tonight, again, with 10 people on stage. I think that's just kind of where we are. It's sort of this morass now. It has to whittle down. We have to have some more time where we're hearing from the candidates. And there were a lot of distractions today. I bet the audience was substantially lower than it has been. And that had something to do with the impeachment. And, people can't just be expected to follow something for 16 hours a day the way crazy obsessive people like we do.
The nuts, yes.
So, yeah.
LB, give me a top tier candidate you were paying attention to. You have any thoughts about Biden or Sanders or somebody in that top tier you wanted to share? A thought?
I tend to be pretty tough, I think, on on Biden, or at least have been, right? I think for me, the last couple of debates he's been trending downward. I thought he was, I thought he stabilized, right? I thought he stabilized.
I thought he was, except in the middle, he was very good. In the beginning and the end, I don't know if y'all saw the comment where he was talking about addressing sexual assault on college campuses.
Yeah.
And he said, we gotta punch at it until we get it done.
Yeah. I mean,
and punch it. He said.
And by the way, he's the only one that has the flubs. But at the same time, you know what could get away with the flubs.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I wonder if we've gotten so used to his flubs, right? Because that's what I'm saying. Like, I think he's stabilized, right? Like, I
think that because the top tier kind of went down to his level, I think it was more acceptable. Because if Mayor Pete or Warren or even Harris or Booker had a real standout day, I think the contrast would have been stark.
Yeah, I think it's gonna sound. If you don't let me sort of explain it, it's gonna sound a little ageist, but I think Biden's missing a beat. And it used to be Joe was Joe, and he would say kind of goofy things, but he didn't say them sort of off tempo. It was just the way he talked, right? He would say kind of goofy things. Yeah. Now I think there's a little beat missing, and the irony is that you stand him up next to the guy who's his age or a year older. I forget where Sanders is. They're just a couple of years apart, right? And Sanders, who survived a heart attack, is looking on his game, right? The guy is like,
he looks good, doesn't he?
Yeah,
he does look good. God bless him.
Right, his strength is so amazing, and he's sharp, and he's intellectually just like on top of it. And I think that people are sort of seeing, a lot of people I think are seeing in Biden a little bit of slippage, and that's why they're kind of flipping over and saying, well, maybe we should take a stronger look at Buttigieg.
LB, I did cut you off. Why did you think? I agree with you. Actually, I want to give Biden a little props. I thought substantively, again, in his wheelhouse is foreign policy. and just getting, sort of reminding us that on a lot of policy things, whether you like him or not, he laps the field on experience with a lot of these folks. I mean, let's be honest about it. I think
that's what he was bringing out.
So talk to me.
I think that's what he was bringing out today. I think he was talking about experience, and I think on a day in which the president's actions and the president's inexperience, right, at best his inexperience, his corruption at worst, right, when that's on full display, you look and you hear the answers of Joe Biden, and you say, "Wow, that does sound presidential." Right? That does sound competent.
I agree with that.
And so I think that's where I think you're right that people didn't knock it out the park, but I really do think like he stabilized. Like yes, his flub-ups were his flub-ups. There wasn't anything more. I mean, the comment I think towards the end when he was talking about, I have the support of the only black woman elected or the first black woman elected, and Kamala
said only. He said only. Like, I think first. Yeah.
Like that. I was like, oh man,
only first full African.
Well, but here's the thing with Biden. Biden, I think, could walk into that office and be a very good president, right? But there is a little bit of a question: can he be a good president for the next 8 years? And it shouldn't be re-election shouldn't be automatic. But I would think that given everything that we've been through, given the destruction that we know Trump has reaped in the bureaucracy and government and foreign policy, that we need someone who can be there for 8 years just to start to repair the damage. And someone strong
James, I'm
and powerful and inspirational.
James, I'm going to add something else too, because I think it's not just about, and especially I think for progressive folks, it's not just about who's a good president, but who's going to lead the administration that we need. And I think that's the other question when it comes to Joe, that if Joe comes in as just like, hey, I'm coming in I'm just trying to think, who would be Joe's, Secretary of State? Who would be Joe's Attorney General? Who would he be picking? And would he be able not to manage them, but to lead them?
Yeah, but to the point of, so let's look at this from a general election, like managing the office of president day to day. Y'all are absolutely right. But again, we have to look at it at a presidential primary in 2019, which has this boogeyman, this 800-pound gorilla with Trump. So obviously electability and sort of the matchup is on people's minds. But at the same time, we have a very diverse community, and a big chunk of it is young, diverse, woke, feel like
Joe doesn't make it. Joe doesn't make it,
but also not only from that perspective of ideology and profile, but there's also a group of people, including people like African Americans in Milwaukee and Detroit that didn't come out in 2016, that also associate him, even with the association of Obama, as well. He was part of the Obama thing, and that wasn't life shattering either. So so there's got to be a, and again, I go back to, what we're looking for now, and
I think what we're looking for is strength, though. Strength. I mean, somebody who can say, I have the power and intellect both to lead us for the next several years, and to start to address climate change on a global stage, and to start to fix the incredible damage that's been done in North Korea and the Middle East and with China and on and on. I mean, the challenges are enormous. They're always enormous for a president, but they've been made so much worse by the damage that Trump has done to this country here domestically and internationally. We want a leader. We want a leader.
LB, any of the other candidates you have any thoughts on in terms of their performance, people you were looking at? I thought Corey was good.
Corey's always good. Corey's always good.
And I thought his repartee with he had a couple moments where he was back and forth with Warren and others where I thought he held his own. I think Corey had a good night. I wanted to hear, put it this way, we've had people, the loyal Found Translation crew knows, hey, we got a lot of love for Corey. I was just invited to one of his people's affairs in Atlantic City yesterday. I couldn't make it. But we know him. I mean, we know the guy. We know his team. But we've been pretty critical of him because we could do better. So I thought he had a good night.
I think he had a good night.
This was a night that I came away with. I wanted to hear more from Corey, which I think for Corey's a good night.
I think he had a good night. I wasn't, it's interesting because I think Klobuchar has been one of these folks that I think has, as the debates have gone on, I think she's gotten stronger. And again, I don't think she knocked it necessarily out the park, but I think, I thought that, not that I didn't think that she didn't deserve to be on stage, but I thought that it made sense. I mean, I think a lot of it, look, I mean, James brings up a good point in terms of look, we've done the multi-candidate, debate stage before. I'm curious as to at this stage, what is it that you need, right? And I think you're right. I think, people have to ask, not only does the field need to get smaller, but how can you flip the format so that we can get a chance to see what these folks are made about, right? And I think what it is that I think this is where we're living in an age where people want engagement and interaction, and the old debate formula is falling short when you're doing more than 3 or 4 or 5 or 6.
Yeah, and
right?
but we're facing dealing with something that the Democratic Party has never had to deal with before. 20-something candidates, right? We started out with, but by now, and certainly by January, we shouldn't be at a place where people are going, "Oh, is that person still in the race?" Or who's that? I don't even know who that is, right? And that's still
Wayne
happening.
Messam left the race today.
That's still happening.
One of your mayors in South Florida.
There are people who are thinking of jumping in.
Pour one out for Wayne.
There are people thinking of jumping into the race.
To me, and again, I think that's what's interesting, right? That to me is what's interesting in terms of that. And I'm just saying, like, if I'm a Democratic voter, I tune in, to these debates, and I feel like, okay, I'm going home, right? Like, I'm going to my political home. I'm going to my ideological home. I want to hear my candidate and who's going to do. And what I'm increasingly kind of frustrated is that, like, these debates ultimately aren't giving me any of that, right? Like and maybe it's because we're getting closer to Iowa. I'm thinking of caucuses and things like that. But I'm just saying, like, like, how many times are these questions going to be asked? Like, was there anything new that was asked today aside from, like,
but most people don't. To James's point earlier, most people don't watch it like us. There's people that just started that watched them for the first time. There's people that couldn't name 10 of those 10 people if you didn't have their placards on it. They know 2 or 3. Look, half of the Iowa electorate hasn't made their decision yet.
2/3, I thought it was even more than that.
Yeah, and that's the people that, literally everyone gets a door knock in Iowa. What I'm saying is that it feels like that for us, but for most people it doesn't. And for most people, they believe me, there was many people that turned it on today and said, "Who's that Asian guy?" Or "Who's the rich guy? What's up with that guy's tie?" Or is she Puerto Rican? The one with the white suit? I mean, that's just the reality of it. So I think we have to be, we have to put that in perspective.
That's what makes, I think, having Julian not on stage even worse.
Well, let's talk about Julian since you got to it.
Let's talk about Julian.
For those that didn't see him there, was wondering, he's still in the race, like another 10 people that we're probably never going to talk about again. Michael Bennett, another senator. Steve Bullock's still in the race technically. But Julian did not quite meet the threshold.
I'm depending on you, Rafael, to remind me who's still in the race because there are so many of them, right? But
Joe
Julian,
one of my former congressmen is still in the race.
Here's the thing: is that this is the party de facto. Of course, that's a party of the people in the sense that it's representative of the country. That's, you don't have to be a Democrat. If you just look at it honestly, that's the case, right? And that you would hope that you would see that on stage. And it is unfortunate, it's tragic, it's sad, whatever you want to call it, that there is no longer a Latino on stage, right? There's no one who in some way, shape, or form is speaking from that block, right?
And, but beyond the Latino part, and we talked about this in our pregame, is that I was struck by 30-40 minutes in, maybe there was one Warren reference early, but that there hadn't been a substantive discussion about the disproportionate impact of these policy issues from a diverse perspective and how it impacts Blacks and Latinos. And it occurred to me, Julian's not there to bring it up.
Yeah.
So
or
that was missing
immigration,
the civil rights lens outside of the Latino lens.
Right.
The Latino piece was minimal today, period.
Yeah.
Is that Julian was the one that was talking about, and I always give him love for this. He brings up Sandra Bland. He brings up housing issues. He brings up, he talks about visiting brothers incarcerated.
But immigrants, was immigration talked at all?
At the very end, as we were preparing for the show.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things. It's one of those things that you and I think we all agree that shouldn't take over the whole conversation, but it should be there in every single debate, because here we are we're having a conversation about what's going on with impeachment today, and while we're talking about impeachment, we see just a couple of days ago an attack by the Republicans on an immigrant, right? Who a lieutenant colonel who happens to be an immigrant, and part of the claim against him of why he's untrustworthy, that he's an immigrant. Well, that's just a spin-off. It's another version of why there are tens of thousands of people wallowing in northern Mexico right now, waiting for their opportunity to apply for refugee status, and we've forgotten about them. Right? They're completely gone. And if Julian was there, I think there would have at least been some discussion about that, right? Because that's still a very real important part.
I want to encourage people, if they weren't following him on Twitter, check out Julian at Julian Castro on Twitter. He was actually live tweeting during the
He was
debate.
live tweeting.
And he was in Atlanta this week. I think he was there today. Meeting with people, talking about housing issues, redlining issues in the Black community in Atlanta. I'll just read a couple quick tweets from him. Finally, a housing question. Wonder who could have answered that one as the former secretary. And then the last one is a quick reminder that poor, working class, Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities are the first and most greatly impacted by climate change. So check out hashtag Julian Debate for that coverage. But, and again, we've talked about it. Julian has been the most surprising one of the figures that's come out of this, how strong he's run. Elbert, any other thoughts about these candidates before we move on to the impeachment conversation?
Again, I'm on this thing that kind of James was kind of saying, like, how would we, like, what's the fair way of and understanding your point that even though we've heard it 3 times, it's someone else's first time. Even when you have the national debates, right? They switch formats, they do different things, right? Like they try to kind of make it there. And I think this, if the Democrats are indeed the big tent party, even if they are indeed the fact that they are trying to really listen to the diversity of the, not just the opinions, but of the cultures that are there, then I think what these same as debates say is that they don't really have a grasp on that, which I think we know, right? Like they don't really have a grasp of how to like engage folks, right? What I'm worried about is that yes, there's a middle ground of folks who, like, if they want to turn into good TV or learn about these candidates, they're not going to turn to this forum or debate, right? And so I really do think that in terms of the candidates there, no one really rose to the level. No one really rose to no one necessarily shot themselves in the foot, because I thought it was a safe space, right? And I actually think that the fact is that, like, when I listened to these folks, it was even more glaring why Julian, why is he not on stage there, right? Like what did these folks, like, what space did these folks need that they couldn't have one other person there? And I know that there are rules, and I know that they're like, you have to raise money, but honestly, like, I think yes.
Let me say one final thing. I mean, first of all, quickly on the 10 people, it forces the thing to be much more structured and much more rigid than it could be otherwise. I mean, if there were 4 people on stage, then you would hear some real conversations. You'd hear some real arguing. You'd hear a lot more back and forth, and that would.
By the way, I thought the group was funny tonight. I thought their zingers.
and you get to see
that's one thing I got to give them credit. They actually, many of them did show personality. Kamala's jokes actually worked today.
A little bit of that, yeah. But you'd get to see even more of that, right? So that's what they. And then the last thing I'll say is that I'm inspired by this. That out of those 20-something people that ran, and the 10 that are just left on stage, and there's a few other, there's a lot of cabinet members there, a lot of great potential cabinet members. I could see Kamala Harris as the Attorney General easily, right? I could see Buttigieg as the Defense Secretary. I could see, just people that are there who are competent, who can do great jobs for this country and come on board with the next president if they don't end up being president.
It's definitely it's a competent bunch. I'm going to leave you with 2 quotes before we get into a question that I'm going to just let hang, and then we'll get into the next segment. You're watching Found in Translation post-debate special. Doesn't matter. It's almost midnight in the East Coast. Me and Elbert are so psyched up. And James Garcia, another great friend in the Southwest, is he's revved up today. To quote Kamala Harris, let me say this. Kamala, if she was a boxer, I'm trying to think, she's a great counterpuncher. She was best when she was kind of challenged. And what I'm finding with Kamala is that what she's got to find, she's real good at debating, but most of the debate's not a debate. It's about, kind of like short monologues. And that's the part where she almost loses interest and falls into a talking point thing. I think we saw more of her personality today, which was good. I thought her jokes and her personality actually worked today. And we're going to talk about in the Tengo Bochincha segment later is that, there's some bigger issues there that the political article that folks read exposed. And then the quote, I am the only one. This was Tom Steyer's catchphrase today. He's the only one calling on term limits. He's the only one whose number one priority is climate change. All jokes aside, Tom is fighting a good fight, and actually have been in touch with, without getting into names, and been in touch with some of the people in his mix. And I must say, the guy cares about our democracy and is at least is bringing a certain civility and a certain something to the debate.
Yeah, he does, but I think most of America is going, who is this guy? Number one.
What's up with his tie? That's the big thing.
No, and secondly, he just strikes me immediately, and I think Bloomberg would be the same way. Hi guys, I'm here now, and I'm the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah.
You know, and you're like, really?
Without the sterling personality of Tom.
Yeah. So
Bloomberg is a horrible candidate.
I just don't understand.
I know, LB, that's your buddy. I know New York. I understand. But what did Five Dog say? Mayor Dinkins, will you still be my mayor? I'll just leave it at that.
That's what it is.
LB, can we please show the picture that's going to kick us off in this segment? Okay. So, LB, do you want to help us analyze with this picture? Explain to people that are listening to the audio version of the show what we're looking at right now, brother.
Yeah, please.
Well, we're looking at a picture of, from our friends in the internets, of Ambassador Sondland, but not seen through the regular eyes, or through the regular lens that most media would say, but through the popular meme, through the popular meme of, oh my God, now I'm blanking on it.
It's Gordon Sondland, America's new hero. With a Tekashi 6ix9ine.
Is he the newest Avenger? Is this what he's doing?
Yes. He's got the Tekashi 6ix9ine tats and wild hairstyle, because for the youngins, we know that if you need someone that needs a snitch on the whole squad, you go to Tekashi. And that is what our intrepid foreign diplomat, Ambassador Gordon Sondland, did today in a rousing impeachment hearing. He basically recanted much of his testimony that he's given in depositions and in follow-up. Oh, my bad, I forgot this and that in written testimony. And in his third bite at the apple, shared with us that he confirmed that it actually was a pro quo, and basically implicated the entire senior leadership of this administration, from Mulvaney, Pompeo, Perry. The list goes on and on. Of course, President Trump. James,
let's talk about this guy, okay?
Talk about
So here's my read on this guy.
Don't hate on the bald man.
Here's my read. First of all,
we're very inclusive here on Found in Translation.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with him being bald. Man,
guys with a cough like James always trying to hate.
Man embodies everything that is wrong with the Trump administration. He seeds corruption, right? And he tried to come off today as, hey, I'm brave and I'm courageous and I'm going to challenge President Trump and I'm going to tell you everything that I know as honestly as I possibly can, and I'm going to throw a lot of people under the bus and they all deserve it. But in reality, what we're talking about is a man who coughed up $1 million, bought an office, as EU ambassador, with no qualifications whatsoever for it, gets caught with his hand in the same cookie jar that Trump is sharing with him, and now he's trying to figure out a way to save his ass and not go to prison. That's who he is. That's who that guy is, right? He's way out of his league, and he's just he seeds corruption, right? And I'm glad he said what he said today, because it's helpful to the prosecution, if you will. But there's nothing to applaud this guy for.
LB, in the streets. Look at my brother text me earlier. He said, there are good. Sometimes there's a good snitch. And we, even though he's a sleazy guy,
on the streets, that's your streets. Sometimes,
once in a while, you need a good snitch. You know? And LB, we know this guy's a slime ball, but right now he's our slime ball. And we're hoping to knock out every Republican argument of not having firsthand information, not having pro quo, and everything else. But the question remains: will that change the hearts and minds of the Republicans in the Senate? Because that's ultimately what this is about.
Maybe I'm just a skeptical kind of guy who's been in the Miami Heat for way too long. But I listen to this guy, And part of me was excited at the beginning in the morning because it was like, oh my God, he's saying everything. And then the more and more I listened to him, the more and more I questioned, and the more I heard like the interplay between Republicans and stuff like that, I thought of the sound bites that they were creating on Fox News and Breitbart and stuff like that. And I just thought, you know, and again, I'm maybe I'm just skeptical on a Wednesday night, but I didn't see. I saw him telling us everything that we knew, and yet still looking at the fact that in the Senate, you're still going to have some Republicans worried about whether or not they can make the right decision. Because at the end of the day, making the right decision in the Senate has very little to do with what they're hearing. It has everything to do whether or not what they're going to say when they go back home. And so for me, what's interesting is that what's going to be the reaction during this Thanksgiving break, right? I mean, we've seen it like historically, like this Thanksgiving break is sometimes like shit will blow up around politics, right? We all remember about Senator Trent Lott, like how he was like, he came in before Thanksgiving, he had a job. At the end of Thanksgiving, he didn't, right? And so I'm wondering what the reactions of folks when they go back home after this, and because I think that's going to be the more telling thing.
You know, the part, and I want to go back to James's point around the treatment of Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. Not only, by the way, an immigrant,
just reprehensible,
but a Jewish immigrant, and that was another part of it.
Yeah,
like, you know, in Shift, a lot, I believe Sondland as well. A lot of the critiques and a lot of the bashing that's happening from Trump. There's also a lot of subtle anti-Semitism in those tropes and in the language. But the you know, I almost feel like if this doesn't, I mean, you know, this cult of personality around Trump is so based on, you know, one of the images or the identities is around this fealty to the military and this almost like, you know, this obedience to the military and obedience to law enforcement. And, you know, I mean, Colin Kaepernick, we can't even kneel on the ground because, you know, like there's all, but then at the same time, this guy who treats people in the military worse than this guy, you know, from what's going on in Syria on a policy level, what happened in Ukraine, to how people like, you know, Vindman have got treated. So my question to you, James, is can that penetrate more? So obviously Sondland, to your point, is confirming what we all, if you had any common sense, paid any attention, we already kind of knew. But the treatment of Vindman, and this is now it's coming from the official White House Twitter, not just the president's personal Twitter. I mean, we're getting official insulting.
Well, but it goes back. Is the general population following this, you know, start to finish? No, they're not, right? But there are a good number of people who are tuning in, and then there's a lot of people who are reading those headlines, and those headlines that are coming out of these hearings are not good for the Republicans, right? And the headlines are things like Purple Heart immigrant who escaped the Soviet Union, attacked by Republicans and Trump. Ambassador, while she's testifying, attacked by Trump. And people call that obstruction of justice and tampering with a witness. They're reading those headlines, and then today's headlines are ambassador handpicked by Trump to lead the initiative in Ukraine, confirms that quid pro quo happened. And by the way, most people consider that bribery. So those are the headlines that most people are consuming. And I think it is going to be moving the needle. And I think one of the things that's going to happen between now and the end of Thanksgiving is that those poll numbers in favor of impeachment are going to continue to move up. And that's the only thing that will switch the Senate.
Right.
No, do you think, and LB, do you think either, and James ever thought about this, you know, part of the mainstream's, you know, hypothesis is that, you know, could a Bolton, if he were to speak, someone that has a lot of credit in sort of the conservative media world and just is going to, you know, would obviously have some firsthand knowledge and would bring a different level of gravitas to the situation, is somehow getting a Pompeo or a Mulvaney or a Giuliani. Would it take something like that to get them on the record? And look, they're all going to CYA, right? So on some level, you know, someone argue Roger Stone's conviction the other day in Florida was as impactful on Sondland not pleading the fifth or us getting the information that we've gotten the last few days. So my question is, do you think are there any other characters that can move the needle, or is it just going to be the steady drip of people understanding, you know, just how harmful this man is?
I'm going to go on a limb and say the character that we haven't seen weigh in is the Supreme Court. Right? And I'm going to say that because of the Supreme Court's earlier decision this week to not force the Trump to hand over his taxes says a lot about the ability of the Trump administration to basically to stand up against these subpoenas. I think, and I don't know what's the timetable. The Supreme Court has to in the next couple of weeks decide that tax situation. I think, and I think if they decide that, how they decide that will have a huge impact on whether or not these other folks actually are subpoenaed. Because at the end of the day, what is stopping what the Trump administration has in its back pocket, or at least they believe, is the fact that they don't have to answer all these subpoenas. They can fight a fight both on the media side and on the legal side on these subpoenas. Once that subpoena issue is dealt with, and it's got to be dealt with before the end of the year, right? Because I do think that Democrats are looking at something that has to end by the end of the year, right? I don't think you can go into Iowa and have this impeachment, at least in the House, still hanging over people's heads, right? And so I think if the Supreme Court decides over the next couple of weeks that these folks, that once Congress has the right to subpoena the president's tax records, and again, they may lose the tax case, but some sort of general opinion about the executive branch's ability to not listen to these subpoenas. I think that's what's going to turn the tables.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Elbert, but I think that for most of those folks, if Pompeo showed up, and were forced to come in, or Mulvaney, they're just going to equivocate. They're going to find some way to try to defend themselves and defend Trump. Bolton would be different. If I were cynical, I would advise Bolton today: go there, testify, be as honest as you possibly can, and you're going to sell a shitload of books, and you could probably run for president. You know,
yeah.
So
the book deal is kind of what he's weighing, because does he want to cash in with the book deal and save the juicy stuff, or would that enhance the book deal? Yeah,
but if he came in,
the book deal is actually a factor in this whole thing. It's true.
Yeah, I
don't see today's. I guess I just he's been thumbing himself. That sounds wrong. He's been thumbing his nose right at the establishment and everybody else. And I think you're right that if he were to do it, that would have some reverberations. But I don't see him doing it unless he's forced to.
Yeah. I don't see him necessarily doing it. But
so
if he did it would.
That's why I bring my hands on in terms of on the court, right? Yeah. Because you're right.
No, but we still have to hear from Holmes, right? We still have to hear from the guy who sat across the table while Sondland was on the phone in that restaurant in the Ukraine, saying things like Zelensky loves your ass. And yes, the investigations are moving forward. And yes, it's going to have. I think that is going to be almost as powerful as Sondland's stuff was today.
And I will say this, Ray, at least from a media headline standpoint, the first person to take the fifth is the biggest headline. In some ways, yes, one of these. Yes, Pompeo can go and say I'm going to take the fifth. But if Pompeo takes the fifth on any of these questions, everyone's gonna have a field day on that joint, right? That might save his ass legally, but at least in terms of from the Trump administration standpoint, I don't see the White House necessarily jumping over joy in terms of people.
The optics of that would be difficult. There's no question about it. You're watching and listening to the Found in Translation, a special post-debate edition. This is your host, Rafael Collazo. Thank you so much for listening to the radio program WPPMLP 106.5 in Philadelphia. Thank you to our podcast listeners and people watching on our video platforms. In this last segment of Found in Translation, LB, yo tengo bochinche. We got to get back to the presidential stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on with our Latino brothers and sisters working with these presidential campaigns. I had to share with people. First of all, I got word that the director of Latino outreach for the Joe Biden campaign, Vanessa Cárdenas, is no longer with the campaign. I don't know why. I hope she's okay. I hope there's no family issues. I don't have any information as to the why, but I thought that was interesting, and the fact that it's a little last minute. Not the best timing for this is notable. The other thing, I don't know if people saw the Political article about why Senator Harris's campaign seems to be in disarray. and they blamed the anonymous sources within the campaign blamed two factors. One is the general lack of direction and organization of the campaign manager, Juan Rodriguez,
Whoa.
a Latino, but also the fact that people that are sympathetic to Juan's cause said it's tough because he's not really in charge. Everyone knows Kamala Harris's sister, a powerhouse power broker in her own right, Maya Harris.
Damn.
Who used to be one of my donors way back when she was at the Ford Foundation, is really in charge. And so Juan, it's hard for him to make a move because everything has to be approved by Maya, the sister girl. So that is an interesting, how would you say, an interesting insight as to maybe why this campaign is underperformed. And the last one is good news. LB, our very good friend, Tomas Kennedy, announced today on Facebook that he's going to be officially joining the Senator Bernie Sanders campaign. Much respect to Tomas. And I must say, Bernie Sanders has a fantastic group of Latinos and Latinas working for him. So the hits keep on coming for Bernie. Got to give him props for the.
For those who don't know, Tomas, tell us about Tomas.
LB, tell us about Tomas Kennedy.
Tomas is currently the political director for the Florida Immigrant Coalition. And he's been, in terms of Florida politics and Florida grassroots organizing, he cut his chops with SEIU. He's been at Flick for a bunch of years. And he's also involved with the local socialist, Democratic Socialist organization down here. But just a really, really good guy. At one point, an undocumented immigrant who basically, at some point legalized his status. And, he's got, I think, he's finishing up his MPA, which one both folks might not know, at least some sort of graduate degree too. Real good guy. And really has been organizing really well.
A woke Argentinian. So,
Yeah. Well, I forget. And was that, and in fact, is also a writer, reporter, writer in his own right. Was at the Democratic National Convention also as well, covering stuff and doing things. So,
and actually, just thought of two Latinas I wanted to shout out who have now taken on prominent positions with other campaigns. Really quickly, speaking of Florida, Cristelis Estanga. I don't know if you know Cristelis, LB out of Central Florida, just got a senior role helping run the Florida operation for Elizabeth Warren. So, una Venezolana who we collaborated with on some activities over the last years in Central Florida. So much respect to Cristelis. And of course, you got to go back to the roots, LB. I don't know if you remember Cecilia Cabello from Columbia CC96.
Yes.
Mexican-American woman who is now the California director for Mayor Buttigieg.
Look at that.
And she was working with Mayor Garcia, another Columbia alum. So she came out of the LA mayor's office and now running mayor. So, we've got a lot of movers and shakers in our mix. And, are
these people all on the text string with you? I mean,
arguably, Fernando Trevino, of course, our other friend, who's the deputy political director for Tom Steyer. So we have friends in all these different camps, and we love y'all, and we just want y'all to get paid, get your resumes built up, and make a lot of money because the white people are so in this political game. Don't let them fool you. They support power, the poor people, but they don't do it for free, my friends. As the leader, let me ask you this question, LB. Speaking of Bochinche, talk to us about the initial journey of the Que Lo Que podcast, the podcast talking about the comings and goings of the Dominican American community.
Well, look, we've been around. We launched about a month ago, and we've got a lot of success. In terms of that, we got over 500 downloads in the first month alone, and we've been featuring a bunch of different folks in terms of great folks who are doing work down here, not just here in Florida, but all across. We talked to our friend Marvin Cabrera, who works with the I Have a Dream Foundation. We also talked to some other folks out of New York, but we're really what we've been able to do is talk to folks coming out of Miami, right? So this young brother Darwin Rodriguez, who works at the PAM, which is a big art museum down here, talking to the stuff, some of the education stuff he's doing, but. Me and Venus are political folks, and a lot of it has been folks involved in the political game. So
let me ask you a question, LB. What's been the reaction of the Dominican? Dominicans are very engaged in social media, love podcasting, love talking. What has been the reaction of the Dominicans on social media about this podcast? I know there's definitely a buzz out there.
Well, there's a buzz, and folks are like, "Wow, we're finally getting to hear our stories, right? We're finally getting to hear, and look, you have these side conversations, and I think if you're involved, like I am, and in our circles, you follow, the goings and goings of other Latinos and other Dominicans, right? And so finally, and you have these conversations, but you never get to hear these conversations for everybody else, right? And so I think part of it, sitting down with someone like Philip Perez, who was a political director for Andrew Gillum's campaign down here, his primary win, for governor, and hearing his perspective, right? Like how he got there, right? And hearing it, and just him talk about the intersectionality being both Dominican in terms of Latino, but also that kind of intersection between also in terms of our connection with our African American brothers and sisters, right? The fact that Dominicans can walk into certain circles that other Latinos can't, right? And what that responsibility looks like, right? And so just to be able to have a space to have those conversations, or even today we did an interview that hasn't yet aired with Claudia Cruz, who's a professor of journalism out in the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, right? She's actually heads their kind of internship program, right? And how she was talking about her memories of her mom making Morir Soñando with Sunny Delight, right? Like in the 80s, right? Like
nice.
And just that conversation, right?
Chalky.
Sunny Delight. That's fancy stuff, man.
And again, we got this whole conversation.
The water Dano was so good.
Well, we got this conversation about Tang versus Sunny Delight, and then how that came in. And
Sunny Delight is for the elite class. That's for you. That's Tang for you coastal elites, my friend.
Well, in New York, it was a whole big brouhaha. So anyway, but that's the point, right? That's the point, right? Yeah. Having that conversation. Oh, yesterday we had a conversation with Jasmeli de la Cruz Jackson, who is the owner of Típico Dominicano, which is it's going to be 35 years next year. This kind of anchor nightclub restaurant in the Alapata section of Miami, where which is also called Little Santo Domingo, right? And she was talking about how the fact that when Aventura first came out, that was the spot that they first did their first, their first. Their thing, their first appearance there as a group, right? And so just talking to some of these folks and getting these stories, people are wondering. I think the other thing too is that, I grew up, I grew up in New York. Ray, you spent a lot of time in New York. Dominicans are accepted there, but in other places around the country, people still are wondering
yeah,
who is the only thing they know about Dominicans are baseball, and then there was a bunch of people that were dying this summer, and maybe they're black folk who speak Spanish and hate Haitians, right? And so this is what people know about Dominicans. So having a space to actually discuss that and letting people get educated on it, people are really excited about that.
Well, definitely check out the Que Lo Que podcast and all your podcast platforms. And I know you're going to be debuting the YouTube page shortly. James, give us the bochincha out in Arizona, brother.
Well, so before I forget, I'm going to have to connect you with some Dominican folks here.
No doubt.
There's not a lot, but they have a festival.
No,
does he play short or third? I forget.
In Arizona, yeah.
Anyway.
But Arizona, no. A couple of things happened, right? We elected the only Latina mayor in the country in the top 50 cities, right?
Regina,
right? Yeah. And she's fantastic. I think she's
mayor of Tucson, mayor-elect of Tucson.
Mayor-elect of Tucson. She now, by the way, is the three largest cities in Arizona: Flagstaff, Phoenix, and Tucson. All have women mayors. And that's an interesting trend for Arizona. And then of course there's been a couple of elections recently of statewide elected officials who are women. So this state is kind of leaning purplish every day, more purplish every day that goes by, and I think there's going to be some really interesting things in the next round. Something that's coming up that I'm working on. We're coming up on the 10th anniversary of SB 1070. And so I'm going to be taking a journalistic look at that with a series of stories on my website, vanguardiaarizona.com. And I'm trying to work with a couple of national organizations to actually put out a report on the impact of 1070 on society, politics, and the economy. There's I won't go into great detail about this, but I think that 1070 in many ways, of course, created the monster that was Joe Arpaio, and Joe Arpaio was part of what created the monster that's Donald Trump. And in many ways, the country under the Trump administration is going through what we went through with 1070 10 years ago, right? And so I think I'm going to take a statewide look, but also kind of a national perspective.
Well, definitely support Vanguardia Arizona and all of Elbert and James Garcia's projects. And I want to shout out really quickly people watching my watch party on Facebook: Roberto, Renato, Robert, Julio, Ana, Montañez, my Pasteles Connect, Alan Gordon from our Columbia days, and a great Mexican-American poet from Dallas, Joaquin Cihuatanejo, who's one of our homies. James, if you've never connected Joaquin, we definitely have to. You guys definitely should collaborate. One of the best spoken word poets we have in this country.
Oh,
and thank you all so much for joining the Found in Translation post debate special. We could go on and on and on and on, and like a quiet storm. And when we have the coffee, and there's just so much going on in our community. But thank you so much for joining Found in Translation. Stay involved, y'all. Make your voice heard in this primary election cycle, because there's, as we've talked about, too many of our people don't know who these candidates are. And I would a call to action, not that I've endorsed personally anybody yet, but I encourage everyone to make sure they're well informed about all the candidates, but particularly Julian Castro, Cory Booker, and Kamala Harris, because we're having this discussion around the diversity of the party, who can bring people together, who's qualified, who's competent. And I think those three people on some level have got a little bit of a short shift in this process. You know, we've been critical of them on some level. We try to be fair to everybody. And I encourage you to get to know who they are, and let people know that they're in the mix, because just because they're not getting the same kind of love by the rules of the game and the mainstream media outlets doesn't mean they're not bringing as much to the table as any of the other major.
And even if they don't get the nomination, they're going to be a presence in politics for a long time to come.
No question about it. And they deserve to be power brokers. Julian deserves, whether or not he, well, obviously it's a long shot for him at this point, but he deserves to get, he deserves to have
his national voice. Yeah.
He deserves to get some delegates out of this process so he could be a power broker in this
he and his teams. I mean, and that's the other thing too important, right? Because these campaigns also, people work on them. Right. They learn, they learn skills. They get jobs in the administration, like that. So his teams, these folks' teams also deserve a shot. If I'm thinking about the Democratic Party, I'm looking at who's some of Julian's team, and I'm like, we're gonna need these folks in November, right? Like we're gonna need those folks.
Well, that's a given, right? And that's the conversation Julian continues to have. I think he said in a recent article, he said, well, if the Democrats aren't going to ride or die with minorities, why should we care about this? What the hell, I think is the phrase he made. Yeah. So so it goes back to that push and pull. So if you're going to need us in the fall, be respectful of our candidates that come from our communities and keep them in mind in this mix. James, thank you, brother. Always appreciate you. Of course, Elby, my co-father, a dear friend, and you guys always keep it funky, and appreciate. Thank you again for watching Found in Translation. Keep the conversation going on social media. Share this with your friends. Have them subscribe to our YouTube channel, our podcast. Support WPPMLP 106.5 Philadelphia, and have a wonderful day.